It happens. You don't know why. You're looking for the why. There is no why. You have to accept it. You move on. At the end of the day, even if you win games of football, sometimes you lose your job. What you do need to do as a coach, as a manager, is self-reflect. Did I do this well enough? Can I do this better? Sometimes, you go into a football club and you look and you want to play this certain way, and players can't do that. You see the game differently. You've got a different style, a different identity, a different mindset, a different mentality. So you try and change it too quick. Or do you go with the old? Well, if you go with the old, then why was there a change?
Carl Robinson is a retired international footballer and former head coach with an extensive career both as a player and a manager. Born in Wales, Robinson enjoyed a notable playing career with clubs like Wolverhampton Wanderers, Portsmouth, Sunderland, Norwich City, Toronto FC and New York Red Bulls. Transitioning to coaching, Robinson managed Vancouver Whitecaps, New York Jets and Western Sydney Wanderers. His coaching journey continued with DC United and Birmingham City, where he served as a first-team coach alongside football legend Wayne Rooney. Now he's on this podcast to reveal insights into his experiences on the field, coaching endeavours and more. I always start at the very beginning of your journey. Growing up in Wales, how did football become a passion for you?
Well, my late father, he was the one that introduced me to it in the backyard, just kicking a ball around just to try and take my energy away from me before bedtime. So I think I was 2 or 3 years of age at the time when he would get me out until it was dark, and then it was dark. I had no choice but to go to bed. So I think that was the first initial impact of kicking a ball around. Obviously then layering into that from when I was a young whippersnapper, as they call them, kicking balls against his greenhouse and breaking glasses of panes and windows and stuff, which didn't go down too well in the early stages.
And when was that realisation, Carl, when you realised you were very good at football and had the opportunity to maybe pursue a career? Was there a moment reflecting upon that time?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't think there was an exact age. I remember when I was 9, 10 years of age, I got called up for a local select team between the Welsh and the Scottish in the Ian Rush tournament in Aberystwyth, which still goes on now. The Celtics, they put a team together, and I was selected as one of 5 Welsh boys along with 5 Scottish boys. And I was 2 years younger than the rest. So I just assumed then at that time I was seen as being not a bad player. And then from that stage, probably then it started to get a little bit more serious.
And in terms of that journey, was there anyone that stood out in terms of maybe mentoring you or guiding you on that experience to maybe eventually get into a football club and have that opportunity? Is there anyone that stands out?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. I think most players, ex-players, get asked that a lot. Who was the biggest influence? And I think anyone would be amiss to say without the parents. My mum and dad were huge for me because they, drove me everywhere, long hours, long days, as well as working 2 jobs each. So it was a little bit hard for them in the early stages. When I was younger, I didn't realise how hard it was for them. As you get a little bit older, you take a step back and realise what they sacrificed and gave up for you. But from the footballing terms, there was probably 2 people that influenced me. The first one was Mike Smith, the old Welsh manager. He was a big father figure in my life. He advised me when I was 14 years of age not to join Wolverhampton and stay with him because they had a soccer school of excellence in Newtown, which was 26 miles from where I live in Llandrindod, and he would coach me individually. Obviously, I was not a bad player at the time, and I was getting a little bit of interest. But he made the promise that if I stayed with him for 2 years, then he would open up more avenues. And certainly that's what happened. And then the second one was Ron Jukes, who was the chief scout of Wolverhampton Wanderers. He was the one when I was 12 years of age in the Aberystwyth, the Ian Rush tournament. Saw me first of all when I was 12, and then was willing to wait for me when I was 14 to then join when I was 16 years of age. And I still remember the first conversation I had with Ron Jukes at 16 when I signed the scholarship form. I was with my mum and dad. I went into the office. I was super excited, a young kid from Mid Wales. And the background of Mid Wales, Llandrindod Wales, where I'm from, is no one probably since 1958 had become a professional sports person, professional footballer. So it's impossible to do. No one does it. I was told no one's going to do it. And I made it a challenge. I made it paramount for me to try and be the first one, just to prove to all the young kids then that come out of that area that there is a chance. And I remember walking into the office with a big smile on my face. I was so happy because a young kid from Mid Wales was going to sign for Wolverhampton Wanderers, which was a fantastic club back then, and still is now. And the first thing he said to me, he hit me straight between the eyes. He went, "Carl," he goes, "it's a happy day for you." He goes, "But I have to be honest with you, I don't think you're going to make it." And I was like looking at him going, "Are you serious?" And I looked at my mum and dad and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're too quiet, you're too small, you're too nice, and that doesn't get anywhere." He goes, "So unfortunately, I'm telling you, you're not going to make it." 3 weeks, so I signed. I didn't want to sign. I wanted to go back to Mid Wales, to my comfort zone. For 3 weeks, I stayed with a host family. I hated it. I cried every night. You know, when you're young, you don't admit you cry.
Yeah.
When you're old, you cry at films, you cry at everything. And I can openly admit now that I did cry when I was 16 years of age for 3 weeks non-stop. I wanted to leave. I was not happy. I wasn't wanted. I felt anger that I'd been deceived. So for 3 weeks, I didn't want to be there. And then eventually I got my head down because my dad said he wouldn't come and pick me up and I wasn't allowed to come home. 12 months later, I got offered a young pros contract. And the day that I went in to sign there, I wanted to say to Ron Dukes, "I proved you wrong, didn't I?" And my dad said, "You should say that." So I did. I walked into the meeting with the execs at Wolves to sign my first professional contract. And he goes, "Have you got anything to say?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I proved you wrong." He looked at me and he went, shook his head. I said, "No, I did. You told me I wasn't going to make it." And he said, "No, I knew you were going to make it. You didn't believe you were going to make it." And I look back at that now, and it was the best bit of advice I'd ever been given in such a short period, because he needed me to believe that I was going to make it. And probably coming from an area that doesn't produce players, coming from a nice area where, you know, you can leave your back door open, was the niceness in me. And he saw that and he knew that. So he needed to toughen me up. And the way he toughened me up was telling me that. But 12 months later, it was a piece of magic from him. It made me grow barriers. It made me put up a wall, and I'll show that attitude of I'll prove people wrong. And that was my start of my journey.
Do you find, just on that experience, do you find yourself having a lot of transferability into your coaching profession now around dealing with players and motivating players and thinking about imposter syndromes and belief, etc.? Do you relate to that experience to enable you to motivate?
Yeah, I do, without a doubt. And again, the biggest thing with the difference between coaching and playing is when you're a player, you just think about yourself. You're worried about your role within the team and what you can do to make sure you're in the team. When you're a coach, manager, you have to get to know people. Everyone's different. They're from different cultures, different backgrounds. You don't know what they've been through in their life or what they haven't. You need to actually get an understanding of the human. And if you get an understanding of the human and you're able to connect with them on that level, then you're able to guide your message into whatever the football specific message is, whether they're playing, whether they're not playing, whether you're selling them, whether you're trading them, whether you're doing all these things with them. But you've got to get to know the individual, because not everyone's the same. I've never met two people that are the same.
How did you find Wolves then? So obviously you had the opportunity to establish yourself and kind of settle in and play professionally, and then loan moves. How did you find that process of trying to integrate yourself in the professional game as a player?
Do you know, it was hard. You know, I can't sit here and say it was easy, because, you know, I went through some difficult times, you know, some insecurities I had confidence-wise. I didn't play well in games. I was trying to overanalyze things. And the simple thing I used to get told all the time is, think about what's ahead of you, next game, next session, next game, all of these things. At the time, you're worried about what people think. You're worried about what people say. Every message from your coach is, you read too much into it. Yeah. So I look at that back then and I think, right, it was the best upbringing for me, because it made me resilient. It made me understand, take a little bit of time to step back and look at the bigger situation rather than just what's up the end of my nose, which is literally all players want to do. They think about themselves. They don't think about the bigger picture. When you're out of the team, sometimes you become a better player when you're out of the team, which is crazy, by not touching a ball. So, but it made you look at different areas, different aspects of your game. And going into a Wolverhampton Wanderers locker room with the likes of Steve Bull and Don Goodman and Andy Much and Paul Birch and all these players, legends, proper people, good people to this day certainly helped.
And in terms of, obviously, you mentioned then being a critical thinker and really dissecting down games and understanding the game better whilst outside of, looking in and not playing. Do you think that has maybe been some of the attributes that enabled you to be critical within your coaching and kind of looking and dissecting the game differently? I'm just interested on how that aligns with what you do today and how maybe your analytical framework of thinking has made you become effective in terms of coaching.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, and it's something that I do use. When you're starting off your football career and your journey, you think you've got skill sets and you're very good at certain things, and then you see your mate who comes into the locker room as well, that's better than you at certain areas. And then there's this balance of, do you work on your strengths more rather than your weaknesses, or do you just work on your weaknesses? And there's no right answer with that. The reality is, you got to work on every aspect of your game, not just your technical and tactical, but you've got to work physicality as well. You've got to be in the gym. You've got to get as fit as you can. But you've got to also work on the mental side, which I think has become a big factor over the last couple of years, because 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was playing, not many people talked about the mental side of the game. The players were just dealt with to get on with it and deal with it themselves, which in a way you learn to be resilient, but people were vulnerable back then. But they just didn't want to admit that, and they couldn't admit that. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to do. So you just got on with it. But I look at the coaching journey that I've been on, and when I started as a young coach 14 years ago, I thought I had in my mind what I wanted to do, what I wanted to become, how I wanted to play, the style, the identity, all of these facets that are part of your game model that you have. And then you go out and play, and then you lose a game of football, or you're not successful in the season, and then you think, right, you try and refine it. So nothing changes in coaching to playing. You have to redefine. You have to change little things, little aspects that make you a better person. But the biggest thing I take out of coaching is self-reflection. You got to look at what you did right and what you did wrong. Vulnerability is not a trait that people like to actually open up to and admit to, but it's the best thing for your learning. If you're able to do it and be open about it, and then take a little bit of constructive criticism, but use it in the right way, it makes you think wider rather than just channel thinker. So it's definitely something that's been brought into my coaching.
You mentioned earlier in the podcast about being homesick, and then you mentioned the keyword vulnerability then in your answer. How did that impact you in terms of going out on loan? Because obviously you've had a range of different loan spells, relocating, moving to different places, that uncertain nature of whether you're going to play, different types of managers. How did you cope with that as a player?
Yeah, the way I looked at it was I gave everything I could to become a young professional footballer. Everything I could. I'd catch the bus at 6:30 in the morning in Wolverhampton, and I wouldn't get home till 7 o'clock at night. And I did that constantly for 2 years. Even when I was playing in the first team, I still used to catch the bus. I still used to clean pairs of boots. I had 6 players that I used to clean pair of boots, because at Christmas time, they would tip you and they would give you 10 quid a week. And then at Christmas, they'd give you £100. So I thought the way for me to actually make money and be a little bit more happy and to get to know them was clean their boots. Because if I looked after them, what that did was that taught me that if you look after your boots, you look after your body, you look after yourself, you become a better person. So that was a trait that I had in me. When I got the opportunity to go on loan, my first loan was Shrewsbury Town. When I was trying to break into the first team at Wolves, I didn't. I was probably 5th or 6th choice. I got the opportunity at Shrewsbury, and I just took it because I wanted to play football. And then from Shrewsbury, it was great. I played at Wembley. We lost against Rotherham. To this day, it still haunts me. But then I went back to Wolves. I established myself, and then I lost my way a little bit before I left. But when Wolves, because it's a big club, wanted to sign big players, you're talking about Alex Ray's, your Colin Camerons, your Simon Osborne's from Reading. They were signing 3 or 4 big name players in the midfield area, and I was a midfield player. I just felt I needed a change at 23, 4 years of age. So, but going on loan to Rotherham, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, I wanted to play. Your career's short, all right? And there's this, it gets thrown out a lot in football. It's like players just want to sit and take their money. I was never like that because I didn't have nothing when I was growing up. I used to use my brother's trainers to play football because I didn't have nothing. So I wanted to maximize every possible opportunity because I knew one day that my playing would stop. and I wouldn't be able to play again, whether that was because I wasn't good enough, wasn't wanted, or was just too old. So when I got an opportunity to go on loan for a couple of months or a month to go and play, I was never going to turn that down. And that's what shaped me into the person I am today.
How did you find Portsmouth when you moved there? Obviously, the successful period for them during that time.
It was great. I went on a free transfer from Wolves, to be fair. I gave up my testimonial at Wolverhampton because they did offer me a 3-year contract. In hindsight, you always say, well, should you have done that or not? I live with no regrets. Every decision I make was for the best at the time, and I still, to this day, think it was the right thing to do. I went in with Harry Redknapp, Jim Smith, Kevin Bond, brilliant people, got the best players. Some of their man management skills and tactics were unbelievable. Harry was just a genuine, good human being. And I played the first 15, 16 games there at Portsmouth, and it was great until we signed Tim Sherwood. And Tim Sherwood signed from Tottenham, world top player, top professional, top midfield player. And Harry said to me, Tim's going to be my number one choice, Robbo, and maybe you might need to go on loan. I lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks because I wanted to try and fight, and I realised saw in training that Tim was on a different level. He was a quality player, but he was quite happy to have me push him. He was a great trainer. He was always giving you advice, and I thought, do you know what? I want to play games. So I went on loan based upon that. But when I went back to Portsmouth at the end of the year when we got promoted, I was still part of that, which was great. It was my first promotion because we hadn't quite done that at Wolves. I was still part of it. But then I made the decision in the early part of the second year to go and find something a little bit more secure for me, albeit in the Championship.
And in terms of obviously finding football clubs and selecting coaches to play for, obviously you mentioned the extrinsic rewards of potential contracts, etc. But are you looking at managers that have a similar value set to you? Are you looking at football clubs in terms of who you can play for and who you can represent in terms of the manager? Is that comes into your mind as a professional footballer to ensure that you get the opportunity to grow and learn as a player? I'm just interested on that concept.
Yeah, I think it does. But as a player, sometimes you don't get the choice. Unless you're at a certain high level, the elite level, where you can get to choose between Barcelona or Paris Saint-Germain. If you're in the Championship, there's probably 6 or 7 teams that would probably want you. And that was the case. Sometimes the team that you're at, so when I was at Portsmouth, I went to Rotherham. That was my first loan. And I went there for 3 months and they were bottom of the table at the time. Rooney was the manager, brilliant person. They had cold showers. Even in the home dressing room, it was really, really poor conditions. But I went in there and I saw a team spirit that was second to none. They didn't want for anything. They understood, their jobs. They were glad to be footballers. But the spirit and the camaraderie between the group was amazing. And it was one of the best loans I had because I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed my football. Yes, I had to take my kit home and wash it myself, living in a hotel. But that was fine. That's part of you growing up. It's part of you grounding as a person, not taking everything for granted. And you look at that. So sometimes clubs don't want to lend you or loan you to other teams that you might be in competition with. And it's a circumstance as well. As a player, you get a feel when you talk to a manager. I have a conversation with you, and is it a warm conversation where I make you feel really, really good in yourself? Is it a conversation where you don't get the connection with me, where you feel that we've got this relationship just from one conversation? Because I think nowadays, if you look at any time a player moves, 9 times out of 10, they say they moved because after the first conversation with the manager, they knew. And all it is warmth, showing them a bit of love, that care, how important they will be in the team and what their role and responsibility will do at getting them to the next level. Because when you're not in a team, it's quite lonely sometimes because you don't get the direction, you don't get the warmth, you don't get the arm around your shoulder from the manager because he's focused on the starting 11 because managers deal with results. So then when you speak to another manager about moving and suddenly he shows you a little bit of care, he's compassionate, he shows you a bit of warmth and he tells you everything that's good about yourself and what you're going to do, you actually want to play for him.
What are your thoughts on the modern footballer then, Carl? Because obviously you mentioned, you used to get on a bus whilst you were at Wolverhampton. You mentioned living in a hotel, etc. Obviously, the game has changed and modified. There's a little bit more stability in that sense, potentially in kind of the academy system, etc. What are your thoughts on the modern game, on how that balances your approaches to coaching and how driven and motivated you are in that period is very different to maybe the outlook of a newer generational player. What your thoughts on that?
Well, society has changed, and all of the older generation of footballers, and I speak to many, many people nowadays, and sometimes they get a little bit frustrated with it, because when you're not inside football and you see all of the givens that the young adults of today get given, they get frustrated because we didn't have them. And I try and explain to them, it's society. There is a change, there is a shift. Modern day footballers, young footballers, academy footballers, category 1, category 2, get given a lot of things. They don't realize at the moment how lucky they are. But they will do over the course. And when we look back at it in 20 years' time and there's another conversation, it will accelerate it again. The older footballers, the older generation look back at it made them resilient. They understood what they needed to do. They needed to fight their way through adversity. The modern generation, sometimes they haven't learned that. They haven't seen that. They haven't dealt with that. That's not their fault. That's the way society is. I look at my own personal situation. I have 2 wonderful kids. I didn't have nothing when I was growing up, and my kids now get spoiled because that's what parents do. They spoil them. So my generation changed. My mum treated me differently to what I treat my kids, because it's society. So you have to adapt and you have to accept it and you have to understand it. But the key thing to it is about getting to know them. You have to immerse yourself in the society of what is today. If you're going to try and change it because this is the way it was done back when you were a young one, you will lose. There's no point in doing that. You'll waste time and energy and experience doing that. So you have to immerse yourself in it. You have to understand it. You have to explain to them, right, that's great that you've got this, but you will be left out of a team at some time. A manager will not play you at some time. You'll get released. Players that get released, if you look at the modern day player, especially the ones in the Premier League at the moment that have been at different clubs and been released at an early age, they've become resilient because they had a little bit of adversity and they had a setback. You will get setbacks in your life, but how can you try and teach setbacks when you haven't reached them yet? It's very, very hard, and I've not met anyone that can do that yet.
So in terms of adapting and transferability, when you reflect back on your career as a player, what was the incentive to go into coaching? Was there something that was a bit of a light bulb moment during your coaching, during your playing journey, when you learnt off the likes of Harry Redknapp and other managers? Did you want to do it, or did you fall into it? I'm just interested on how that come about for you. And obviously from a cultural perspective, it's different because you've had experiences in Australia, America, etc. I'm just interested on how that come about.
It was literally, when I left Wolves, I had a number of managers. I had Graham Taylor, Graham Turner, Mark McGee, Colin Lee, John Wood, all at Wolverhampton Wanderers, and it was great. Five managers in seven years. Then I went to Portsmouth, Harry Redknapp, and everyone knows about how influential Harry is. And then during my loan spells, then I had Chris Turner, I had Neil Warnock, and I had Mick McCarthy. And then probably when I was about 25, 26, the way that Harry Redknapp managed his locker rooms was phenomenal. And then I went to Sunderland with Mick McCarthy, and when you talk about leadership and you talk about team first mentality and you talk about work ethic and you talk about rolling your sleeves up and fighting, he was able to influence players that weren't playing, which was an incredible trait that he had. He was able to generate this culture and environment and get everyone rowing in the same direction, everyone on the same page. And at that time, I thought, right, okay, I'm really good. And I remember Mick would always say to me, Robbo, you're really, really good at making other people around you better. And it was a sentence that he gave me. And by the way, at that time, he left me out of the team on the Saturday, which was incredible. And at the time, I didn't like him. I thought, well, what are you doing? And the reason he said that to me was because he was going to hit me with disappointment, which he did by leaving me out. But he knew that I would react positively and I would train properly to make the players ahead of me make sure they're on their game, because they knew that I was angry, mad, disappointed about not being playing, and they couldn't drop their levels. And at that time, I thought, do you know what? It's about man management. Coaching is about managing people. In every business, is about managing people and how you treat people, speak to people as you want to be spoken to. So 26 years of age, I thought, right. So now my mind started going and thinking, I know culture, I know environment. Now I'm going to see how it breaks down tactically. So then I started making notes on Mick and started making notes on his his formations, his teams, his training sessions. During that period, I was involved with Wales, and Wales had Mark Hughes as the manager, and then they had a change and then went to John Toshak. Well, John Toshak, fantastic human being, first of all, fantastic person. His mind was second to none in relation to when you sat down and had a conversation with him and talked about football. He would take you into areas and often different tangents that I didn't know existed. So at 26, 27, with the culture and spirit and the camaraderie generated by Harry and Mick that you needed to do, as well as the tactical mind of John Toshak, who managed Liverpool, Real Madrid, won the La Liga with Real Madrid, and you think, wow, in their minds, they are steps ahead of everyone else because they know what they want. They're very clear. There's a lot of clarity in it. So notes and notes, years of taking notes and books and training sessions. But what I started doing then, because I was a first team player. I'd played 200 games in my life, and I thought, oh, I would change that. So I'd make a note of it, and I would do that differently. And I wouldn't have done it with that numbers, and I would have made it a little bit bigger, and I would have changed that, and I would have adapted this session, added this layer into it. If it was a transition session, I would, rather than do an attacking transition, I would do a defensive one to an attacking one, and I would try and layer it a little bit. And the books started, and my mind started. And then when I left Sunderland, Mick had said to me, "You'll be a manager one day, Robbo." And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "You think like a manager." So that was probably the first time when he actually admitted to me when he left me out that I was a good person, a good mind, and he knew the direction I wanted to go. Having said that, managers make people around them better. And I did that as a player, probably to the detriment of myself sometimes. I didn't think about myself, but wherever I went, I knew that wherever I played, the people next to me enjoyed playing with me, and I carried that into my management.
Would you say you were quite an emotional player, Carl?
I was, but I didn't show it. I was a fighter internally. You know, there was a hunger, a desire inside me. I wasn't nasty, again, but I had, if there was a challenge to be made, I would make it. And if there was a ball running down the sideline, I would purposely slow up to make sure that I would catch you and the ball and put you into row Z, as they call it. So I had that in me. Was I a fighter? No, I wasn't. But I like to try and get in people's heads. You know, I was one of these that if I knew you as well, I enjoyed playing against my mates, because when I enjoyed playing against my mates, then I tried to influence them in their mind, because I, not just one person, I tried to say, well, you know, why is he telling me this about you and that lot, and tried to get them to argue with each other, take their minds off their game. So it was the mental side I was trying to touch into at that time when I was playing against my friends. So I didn't show emotion too much. And I still don't now. You know, as a coach, manager, you know, you're passionate in what you do, but you don't need to jump around and swing your arms around and do all these things. Yes, of course, sometimes emotion takes over you and you can't control it. But I think you have to be self-driven. You have to have your mind. You have to be clear with who you are as a person and what you are, and be you. Because if you're not and you're trying to be someone else, then unfortunately you'll trip over.
That kind of leads me to my next point, because I'm interested on how you set standards for yourself, obviously from a playing career, but going into a management career where you've got standards and values on how you perceive the game to be played out, whether that's on a match day, whether that's at training. And if those standards are not set by maybe the players, what kind of things do you do to ensure that there is a logic and a togetherness to try and, you know, meet those standards and collaborate effectively and lead effectively? Because obviously, like you've just mentioned, you know, you want to give 100%, and you've looked at maybe the emotional perspectives and what motivates you to become a better footballer. But obviously, you're trying to transpire that onto others. I'm just interested in how that works, because, like we said as well, different generations, different types of people. How do you work with that?
Well, again, I think whenever you go for a job, you know, and there's so much turnover in jobs, and whether it's managers' jobs or coaching roles, first team coaches, assistant managers, all these, you know, owners of football clubs, they want to see, or they want to hear, you want to play open, expansive, free flowing, attacking football, 4-3-3. We want to be high pressing and all that. That's the reality of what people want. The reality of what people can do is a little bit different, because everyone sees the Man Cities, the Liverpools, the bigger teams that are able to do it, the Brightons, you know, but there's other teams that are really, really successful that aren't able to do it, all right? So each manager has their own non-negotiables. They have their own skill sets as a person. They have their team around him, which is almost as important. You've got to be able to delegate as a manager. You've got to have people around you that are as good, if not better, at certain facets within the game. Your team of coaches, staff that is needed has to have different skill sets to you, but the one fundamental thing that you also have to have is trust. You have to have a trust factor and a respect factor. The first day you walk in as a manager, as a coach, you set the standards. The standards must be set, and they're set by you. So you turn up on time, you be there on time, you make sure that you're willing to help. When I first took my first coaching job in Vancouver in Major League Soccer, I used to stay behind and help out with the equipment. I used to put the cones out, and I'd not purposely, but they used to, give me a bit of stick. I would ask, eventually my staff would set out the equipment and I would go out and I would move it by 2 yards, because in my mind, I wanted to set everything up right. It needed to be perfect. But at the end of the session, I would pick it up and I would go and do that. And the reason why I would go and do that is because if I was the manager and I was the last one to pick up the cones when it was raining and go and pick up the balls when it was raining and go and get the ball behind the fence when it was raining, every staff member cannot drop their levels. I'm willing to do it. And as the manager of the football club, the head figure, you set the standards. So there's no excuse for anyone. So if people leave equipment there or people don't turn up on time, you have the ability and you have the strength to say to them, that's not acceptable. You're not on the same page as me. I'm willing to do this. You need to be willing to do this. So I think the first day you walk into a football club is the way the standards are set. As you get a little bit older and get a little bit more experience, you understand then you need to listen. Because as a manager, you need to listen, not just to your staff, but you need to listen to your players. And I had this in Vancouver again. We were very successful. We had a skill set of players built to be a very good attacking transitional team. We had Alphonso Davies, we had Christian Teixeira, we had Jordi Reyna, we had Kai Koma. We had some fantastic, talented attacking players. But we wanted to, it was a trend going through football about trying to be a possession-based team, trying to create more. We would end up with 40 to 45% possession. But that wasn't the silkies, that wasn't the fun times. So you need to try and generate more. So I remember in 2017 season, we had 60% of possession in 8 games. We lost 7 and drew 1 out of that 8 games of dominating teams. And I remember sitting there going home and thinking to myself, well, we've got to continue to do it. But as a manager, you're judged on results, as you know. And then you think about it and go, right, you need to stop the trend. Do we want to give up the ball? Because teams knew that they would give in us and they were trying to flip on the head of what we were good at. So I spoke to the players and we had a big team meeting. And I said, guys, listen, I'm open to see you're the players. You need to play what you want to do. We can do anything. All right. This is what I see. This is what I want. This is what I expect. But little tweaks here and there. So we did. We gave the first pass to them. We set our line a little bit deeper. We changed our pressing triggers from really high up from goal kicks. We come 20 yards deeper. We actually set our build up specifically on one side. So we were able to identify we're going to build up on the right and we're going to play 3, 4, 5 passes here to exploit the left with Alphonso Davies, who was coming from a left back position, which I was told at the time he wasn't a left back, which now he plays for Bayern Munich as a left back. So maybe he was a left back. So all of these little nuances within your mind you speak to, but you get help along the way from staff, from players. So again, it's about evolving as time. It's about understanding. It's about listening. And the more and more older you get, you tend to listen more, you tend to speak less. And that's why the older managers, you get very few words from them because, as you said, they understand what they need to do to be successful. They take a step back. They have first-team coaches, assistant managers that do all the talking, all the shouting, all the ranting, and they're just the logical ones who guide the direction that the team is going to go.
I think it's interesting how you lead by example, and you mentioned that holistic approach and kind of having a sense of giving your players a sense of autonomy to really understand and dissect certain things that are happening during a game. And you mentioned results-driven perspectives and how that might shape and funnel your outlook towards a certain game or a certain training session. Does that differ across different countries, or is that the same philosophy stayed strong with you going into, Vancouver, Sydney, and obviously Birmingham City? Is that kind of changed and modified during your journey? I'm just interested on how that might differ down to maybe cultural differences and different situations on where you land the job and the position the club's in?
Well, there is, there's no two doubts about it. There is a totally different footballing culture in different countries, right? The game is the same, we know that. Obviously, the finances are different. In Major League Soccer, it's a very different beast over there. I went and joined in 2007, and I was there till 2019. And then I took 2 years out. I wanted to try something different in Asia, which is why I went to Australia. Then COVID happened, so that set it back a little bit. And then I'll come back, and I went back into Major League Soccer again with Wayne and DC United. But the setup of Major League Soccer is like American sports, like the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, all of these, and it's salary cap driven. And it's a knowledge that you need to know, and it's a knowledge that you need to have. And I immersed myself in that when I was a player there at Toronto when I first went, because Mo Johnson was the manager, the Scottish legend, as you call him. John Carver spent a little bit of time over there, but from my time at Toronto to then New York Red Bulls with Hans Backer, who was Sven-Goran Eriksson's assistant, and then my time in Vancouver, it was a brilliant learning for me. And what I wanted to do, I've always been a learner. I've always wanted to tap into managers' minds, coach's mind, ask them what they're thinking, be inquisitive. And I always used to take the knowledge on board, write it down, make notes, all of these things to try and shape me for what I wanted to become. But the salary cap thing is a big thing over there. And, European coaches, foreign coaches that go over there sometimes find it difficult because you can't just go and sign any player you want. There's international spots, there's general allocation money, there's TAM money, there's under 22 initiative players. You've got these homegrown players, you've got to juggle the cap the way you want to. So I've got a knowledge of that inside out, and it's great. And it is like playing a little bit of football manager, like everyone says, but you have to be strategic with it. You have to understand that you need to generate to accumulate. You sometimes, when you're successful, as in most American sports, you probably don't strengthen your roster because your players get bonuses because you do well, and you get the worst pick of the draft, which obviously is unfortunate because you do get rewarded for a little bit of failure over there if you finish last. But they're trying to make it as competitive as it can, which is a brilliant structure. Then you go to Australia and they do the similar thing on a smaller scale. And then you come back into the Championship, which is arguably the best in the world. Everyone talks about the Premier League, which is brilliant. I know that, but it's so even, the Championship. And then it's a different kettle of fish again. So you look at it, do I change? No. Do clubs, the circumstances change? Yes. And also your role changes based upon what your role is as coach, whether you're the manager, whether you're the assistant, whether you're a first team coach, whether you're a support coach, all of these things change as well. But my mind, non-negotiables, I still try and put smiles on faces. I still try and make enjoyable training sessions. I still demand work ethic of players and staff. There's a direction that we all want to go. You all need to be rowing in the same direction, and you need to do the little things, because if you do the little things correctly, the little things become big things. So having that mentality of speaking to people the way you want to be speaking to, picking up things if you leave them, picking up if your teammate leaves them, but telling them he can't do that, is a culture-driven thing that you want to try and get into football clubs.
You mentioned Wayne Rooney, DC United, Birmingham City. What did you learn off him during that period of working collaboratively together? Well,
first, he's a brilliant person. Yes, I've played against Wayne a few times during my career, but working with him, he's got a special mind. He understands football in a way which, again, I mentioned John Toshak when I was working with him with the Welsh football team. He used to think so far ahead. Wayne is very similar. He thinks about things 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. He's very, how can I say this? He's matter of fact. He knows, he's very clear with what he wants, which is brilliant for coaches, because that there's not, should I have done this? Should I do this? He's clear with what he wants. He's off the cuff in relation of, he senses something and he does it straight away. And usually 9 times out of 10, he's right. He gets this feeling in game, which is a massive skill set, which all coaches, the top coaches, probably have. He's able to adjust and things like that and see it in advance. But he's just a genuinely good person. That was the thing that took me to him. When I spoke to him, I knew I wanted to work with him and work for him. Then when you get on the football pitch and you listen to him and his conversations and talk tactically about the game, what he sees, how he wants to do it, the way he wants it to go, There's always a plan in place. Unfortunately, our time in Birmingham was short. We know that. We probably didn't win enough games of football. There was a plan in place. Unfortunately, that plan now has gone. We understand that. It's a results-driven business sometimes, but there was a lot of good work that went on behind the scenes that Wayne certainly did. And I know that more than any because I've been in his position for 10 years, albeit over in North America. And sometimes you don't get the fruits of your labour.
How do you deal with that as a team then? So obviously at DC United, as well as, Birmingham City, there's a sense of all eyes on Wayne Rooney because he's such a superstar, and there's always that pressure of can he replicate what he did as a player into a management role, the external noise. How would you cope with that as kind of a team to try and make sure that you stay focused and focus on, process-driven goals rather than the external things that are happening?
Well, you look at your leader, and he was the leader, and he was so single-minded. It was brilliant. Like you talk about the pressures in football and things like that. You got to remember, he moved from Everton to Man United. He played for one of the biggest clubs in the world at such a high level. He was England captain, record goal scorer up until recently. All of these things, he's dealt with everything. So you look at it and you go, losing a game of football, losing 3 games in a row, not able to break this scheme that we're in. How do you deal with it as a manager? Well, he's done it all. He's been there, he's done it. What he needs to do, and he's open to do, is get as much experience as he can. Being manager at Derby County was not easy. And when he opened up on it, again, it's his journey and his story. When he opens up on it, some of the stuff that he's dealt with is incredible. You don't get that on coaching licenses. You don't get that on scripts. It's dealing with the moment, dealing with the person. But the key thing that I will say working with him was he's just a normal person. He's a brilliant person. He'll do anything for anyone. He's caring. He's loving. Obviously, he's got his wonderful family. But he sees the game in such a way, which I learned so much from him in the 12 months that I worked with him.
Why do you think it never worked out at Birmingham? Was it the situation? Was it a lack of time? I'm just interested on why you think that never kind of come about. I'm just interested in what you think.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't think there's one thing. And I think the biggest thing in football, sometimes you're always looking for the why. When you're a manager, you are going to either get sacked or you're going to leave the football club. And then when a decision's made, you have to respect the decision. So again, I don't think there's one factor to it. At the end of the day, we know that football is a results-driven business. We didn't win enough games within that period, and I think Wayne will be the first enough to admit. But there was a lot of work that was going on behind the scenes that he was doing to try and move the club forward, and I think he did that. And obviously now the decision's been made. You respect the decision and you move on. But I've got no doubt in my mind that Wayne will be back. He's a very driven person, as he's shown in his career, footballing-wise and coaching-wise. He doesn't take easy challenges. You've seen that with Derby and at DC. I think people forget sometimes that DC United, prior to Wayne going in, were bottom of the table, and he took them on to the verge of 2 points outside the playoffs coming into the last game of the season. So from where they'd gone to where they were, we ended up, and yes, we missed the playoffs by 2 points, but from where they were the previous year, he made significant strides. So that was a success in my mind, a success in his mind. And that was just 12 months, 18 months into his journey there at DC United. Sometimes clubs fit and sometimes they don't. I think you've seen in the Championship now with Darren Moore leaving, it happens. You don't know why. You're looking for the why. There is no why. You have to accept it. You move on. At the end of the day, even if you win games of football, sometimes you lose your job. So if you don't win games of football, sometimes you have to move on.
I'm just interested on the process of, and again, I don't want to bring a negative tone to this, but obviously getting told that you're going to be sacked and that kind of, pressure that happens, in the media and with fans, etc. What is that process like for you, Carl? Like, are you informed as a team? Do you have a meeting? What does it look like? I'm just interested for those that might be listening to this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say I don't think I've met a person that actually enjoys being sacked. I will say that. It's never nice when you lose your job in any walk of life. But again, it happens, not just in football, it happens in every business. There's 2 ways you go. You either leave yourself to explore something else, another opportunity, or you want to go and get financially rewarded somewhere else better, or the company decides to make a change because they want to go in a different direction. I think the first time it happened to me, again, when you're a player, you decide to move club if you want. It's the same thing as a manager telling you you're not wanted at a football club and you need to go and get a move. That's the same as a football club saying to you, we want to go in a different direction with a change of leader or a change of scenery and things like that. So You have to become resilient to deal with it. The initial thing is you're shocked, you're surprised. But after a day or two and your family is still there, that your kids still love you the same. Obviously, sometimes there's narratives that are put out there in the public domain, which are right. Sometimes they're wrong, and if you try and justify the ones that are wrong because, you didn't think you agreed with it, you spend more time and energy trying to justify something that you don't need to justify, and sometimes 9 times out of 10, the story doesn't get told and you have to accept that. And that's why I say to this day, Jose Mourinho is one of the best at losing his job and just getting on with it. I saw he signed with Adidas the other day. Brilliant. He's smiling. Yes, he's been financially rewarded, I think, with a number of times by a number of payouts from a number of clubs. He wins. He's a serial winner. I like him, loathe him, love him, hate him, whatever you want to do with him. He's left his job 5, 6, 7 times. He's been sacked 5. So until you're a manager and you've been sacked and understand what it's like, it's not nice. I said, but the process of it, I don't know behind the scenes. What I do know is sometimes you can see it coming, and there is a little bit of noise. I assume from a club perspective, the club needs to have in their mind what is going to be the contingency plan if you're going to make changes. Like if you're a manager and you want to get rid of a player, if I decide I want to get rid of you because I want a different profile of player, I've got to have identified the player, scouted him, seen him, spoke to him, and know he wants to come in before I can move you. Otherwise, if I can't get him in, that I need to keep you on side. So all these things, so nothing changes, I think, whether you're a player and you're being told by a manager, or you're a manager being told by a club, or you're a club owner and you're looking to sell your football club. I don't think anything changes, but it is never nice when you lose your job in any working life or in any company.
That whole process, because it's so common, it's interesting from a fan's perspective to see how that actually works out,
And the only probably best analogy I can give you is sometimes there is no why, because people will say, right, it is strictly done on results. Okay, but if you're doing well, it's not done on results. Is it the style of play? Is it the identity? No? Okay, well, you're playing good football. Is it a clash of personalities, which Jose gets labelled, but every player that plays for Jose that does well wants to play for him, until then it's nearly at crunch time, and then suddenly there's 1 or 2 that come out. So all of these facets that come out, there is no one reason. And you cannot, as a coach and a manager, spend hours and hours and days and weeks trying to figure out what. What you do need to do as a coach, as a manager, is self-reflect. Did I do this well enough? Can I do this better? Right, would I have done this? Would I have changed this? Did I have people around me? Sometimes, you go into a football club and you look and you want to play this certain way, and players can't do that. Do you change too quickly? Sometimes you go into a football club and you, very rarely you go into a football club when clubs are winning. And if clubs are winning and doing really well, then you think, right, you have to change it because you're a different way, because you see the game differently. You've got a different style, a different identity, a different mindset, a different mentality. So you try and change it too quick. Or do you go with the old? Well, if you go with the old, then why was there a change? So again, you have to put your stamp on it as a manager. You have to put your stamp on it as a person. You have to be you. You have to be true to who you are, decide what you want to become and be, and stick to it. What you can't do as a coach, I think, is chop and change. And if you don't do that, whether you keep your job for 3 years, 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, it's out of your hands, because everyone has a boss, and the boss makes the decisions at the end of the day.
Do you think that was a challenge in terms of you being at Birmingham? You mentioned the different types of context of where you enter a football club. Obviously, Birmingham were doing okay during that time before you came in, and obviously the context is different. Is that something that maybe challenged you in terms of how you approach the situation?
I think with any football club that you go in, not just Birmingham, with every football club that you go in, there's always challenges. There's always ways that you want to try and improve certain areas, whether that's individually, collectively, whether that's the team shape, whether that's the formation, whether that's pressing high, whether that's mid-block pressing, whether that's defending deep, whether that's trying to defend on the halfway line. All of these things come into play, and they're all openly discussed by the staff. In hindsight, you look at things and say, right, I could have done this, could have done that, should have done. But you can't live in hindsight world. If you live in hindsight world, which doesn't exist, everyone's perfect, and they're not perfect. So is it? I think there's a lot of self-reflection gone on, not just with me, but obviously with everyone at Birmingham. I wish them nothing but the best. Like you said, if good people at a good football club, it didn't work out for myself, because I come in with the manager and I've left with the manager, which is totally fine as well. And you want all your clubs that you've worked at to do well. I never have a bad word to say about any of my old clubs, whether it be DC, whether it be Vancouver, Western Sydney, Newcastle Jets, and then your playing career, Toronto's and New York's and things like that. I want them to do well because you meet good people along the way. So, but don't look for the why. There's no reason to look for the why. Self-reflect, have a look at what you can do better. Next job you take, you try and change things, because if you do the same thing and it's not working, and it's the same thing and it's not working, human nature says that you might need to change something.
So what's this process like for you then, Carl? Self-reflection? Are you kind of having informal conversations about the game, formal conversations about the game? How do you develop yourself whilst away from, the role of a head coach, etc.? And obviously you mentioned time to reflect. You mentioned the way that you absorb knowledge from documenting certain things. I'm just interested in how you keep, contemporary during this period.
Yeah, well, it's totally different. But I said between being a manager and being an assistant, because the assistant you follow the lead set by the manager. In a manager's mind, you're clear with what you want to do, how you want to play, areas that you want to work on, things like that. Assistant, you're there to support and supplement what the manager wants. The extra little bit of training, the extra little bit of planning you do as an assistant, because you give ideas, you present them to a manager, and then the manager decides yes or no. So it's been actually a really, really enjoyable time for me. But the last 12 months, 2 years that I've been, 2 jobs that I've been away, just taking a step back from it, because I love football. I love being on the coaching field. I love training. I love getting to know the players. I love getting to know the staff. I love interacting with people, because, culture's a big thing in football. I think everyone knows in Major League Soccer, when I was the manager there, we had 15 South American players, Central American players. I loved they would come in every day, whether you lost a game or won a game, they would come in, they would dance, they would sing, they would have the music on. They would always be laughing and joking. And then you use that culture and you bring it over here to an English football locker room. And if you've got 12 to 15 South American players, Central American players, and you lose a game of football and you're a manager and you go in and they're dancing and singing in the locker room, maybe that's not what you want. When you go away with the national teams, the Central South Americans, you see them walking, singing, dancing along to their games. So you have to understand cultures. And I enjoy going to club visits. I'm going to Belgium this week. I'm going to spend some time with a friend of mine over there at a top club in Belgium. I've been speaking to technical directors. I've been speaking to sporting directors to see in their minds, what they're doing, how they work on a daily basis, the challenges they have. I've done all my coaching qualifications. That's things. I'll look at different avenues to learn, because the day you stop learning, I watch games as fans and I watch games as an analyst. I have in my head, well, why is he doing this? Everyone's talking about the inverted fullback at the moment. And I think a good game to watch like yesterday was Liverpool and Arsenal. Alexander Zinchenko plays as an inverted left back on the side. Joe Gomez plays as an inverted left back for Liverpool. And you look at that and you think, well, it's the same way of building up in a 3. Man City do it in a different way in relation to a centre-back steps up when they build with a 3, but they got the pace of Kyle Walker on the outside to stop transitions. So all these little analytical knowledge related things you can learn, I'm always taking notes of. I'm always watching games. And if you learn something every day, you're going in the right direction. And when you speak to people and you're open and honest and you ask them why and you're inquisitive and you speak to them properly, you don't know anything. I've never met anyone that knows everything at the moment. They don't know everything. And the top managers, if you actually listen to the way they talk after games, they very rarely give you much tactical information, knowledge after games. They don't. They say very little. But when you go in and see them work on the training field, the amount of knowledge, the amount of detail they go into is incredible. And then in a 20-second clip after a game, whether they won, lost, or whatever, they give you very little. So you only see little snippets of things. So now, during this period, I'll spend as much time, as many hours as I can, learning, being inquisitive, asking people questions, tapping into people's minds and seeing different cultures in different countries, different ways of playing, different styles, all of these things. Because my next job, whenever that will be, I'm sure, a challenge again. And you look at it and I want to embrace it. I look forward to it and be full of, full of energy when I go into it, because I think that's what you need to do as a coach.
It kind of leads on to one final segment of this podcast. I'm interested on, your journey so far has been very impressive in terms of that playing career and working with different cultures, different countries, and then coming back to the UK and applying that and continuing to apply that and develop. Where's the next stages for you? You mentioned, assistant coaches, head coaches. What's your kind of ambition then, Carl? Is there something that you have set out for yourself to try and achieve? I'm just interested on what potentially the next stages for you will be as a coach within the professional game.
Yeah, well, I like to learn. I'm a worker. I think anyone who knows me knows I'm a worker. I like being on the grass. I like putting, if I'm not working, then my mind's going off on different tangents, and I don't like that. So I'm learning Spanish at the moment, which is a big thing in this break that I'm having. But when you say whether you're a coach, assistant coach, whether you're the head coach, obviously there's a bigger role or responsibility when you're the manager. Assistant is different because you're there to support. Because I've been brought up in the US and Canada, and the background of the salary cap and that lot, my mind is being active as the technical director. I know what I want and how you work in relation to that. I'm probably going to get on the sports director course, which I think is a big interest to me for bigger picture stuff. Because when you're a player, you want to be player of a successful team. When you're a coach, you want to be a manager. When you're a manager, then you say, right, okay, you want to be a manager, and you're really good at being a manager. When you've worked in the salary cap and budgetary side of it as well, you understand that you can work within budgets. You understand how to deal with people. You lead people that are not on the training field. I've done that with Vancouver as well. Now I'm talking about going out of my comfort zone a little bit and learning the sports directorship course, which is another great course about giving you avenues within the business. So suddenly now it's not just the football is one part, it's the commercial side. It's the tickets, it's all of these sides, it's the supporters, it's the brand, it's all of these things. It's about the club model that you want. You need to generate to accumulate all of these things. Tick a box for me. They interest me, and having said that, I spent a lot of time when I was in Australia in COVID and in DC with the academy. Spend hours and hours with the academy coaches, with the academy directors, with the kids, because I just love football. And I look back at when I was a youngster and people who helped me and why they helped me. And I look back with all the experiences I've had in the game. And I just think I want to help people. I've always helped people, whether I played, whether I was not in the team, pushing the players in the team, whether I was in the team helping the manager, whether I was then the coach helping the manager, whether I was a manager and I wanted my staff to help me, whether you're a technical director, you rely on people. And that's why the biggest value that I have is be true to who you are, treat people with respect, treat people as you want to be spoken to, do every little thing correctly, and then just lead in the right way. And if you do that, I think you're on the right way to where you want to get to. And people's goals are different. I like to do things differently. Which is why I've traveled the world, and people say, well, we'll look at what the experience that you didn't have this and didn't have that. Well, when I come to England, I've won the championship twice. I played 500 games. Most of my games were in the championship. So I know the championship. I've been out of the country for 15 years, but I've been working as a coach since when I went to Red Bulls as a player coach at 33 years of age. I'm now 47. So 14 years I've been involved in coaching. So again, you just need something that takes your fancy, that you want to try and tick into what's next for you. So again, it's an open-ended question. Do I know clearly what I want to do? No. I will work in football. I know I've had some opportunities that I don't think are right. The one thing I will do when I go into a role, I will fully commit to it and immerse myself in it. I want to be in that role. I won't want to take an academy role and 3 months later, jump into another different role because it's ahead of what I want to do. I want to then commit myself to the next year, 2 years, 3 years. That's where my mind's at the moment, which is why they say always take a little step back when you leave a job.
Excellent, Carl. Carl, I just want to say thank you for speaking to me on this podcast. I share the same values in a way, again, from a working class upbringing, and I think it's enlightening to see, your passion and your dedication and your enthusiasm for football and coaching. And I just want to wish you well in your next steps, wherever that might be. And like I said, thank you and good luck in the future.
Thanks, Chrissy. Pleasure.